Hi, my name is Blair, and this is a Patchwork Culture. And today I want to talk about second chance authors. I have three that I want to talk about today, and so let's get started. The first one is actually a success story, and it's Ken Liu. So I tried to read The Grace of Kings several years ago, and I got about 100 pages in, and I just could not get into it. I remember feeling like the uh, the sections were very short, like the chapters or the sections within the paragraphs were broken up, and it felt like we would switch from one character to another in a very short span of time. So we didn't really get to know them. And it also was set up in such a way where it kind of felt like the construction of the plot was very transparent. And I don't know if I can articulate this well, but it kind of just felt like watching a chess game. And I don't really know anything about chess other than the fact that, people take turns. And so you know that one person will take a move and then the next person will take a move. And so the game is being constructed in that way. And even though I might not know what the next move is, it just very clearly is a game. And the story being set up that way, even though, again, I didn't know what would happen, it just felt like it was obviously being built up, and that was more in the forefront of my mind than the actual story and the characters and everything that was going on. So, because I was moving, I decided to give the first and second book away. So, I had The Grace of Kings and The Wall of Storms. I gave those away and moved on with my life. Several years later, I saw a few booktubers talking about it and raving about the series. And I think it was like Jimmy Nuts, Bookborn, and Literature Science Alliance. And I was like, okay, I'm missing something. There were some books that they like to read that I'm either interested in or also like. And so I wanted to give the series another chance. Sadly, that's when I found out that the American paperbacks, which I had, were pretty hard to come by. And so I was kind of sad that I lost the chance to have those covers in my collection. But I ended up getting the UK paperbacks from the Book Depository before they closed. And so I have all the books in the series in the UK paperback. So anyway, I was like making a challenge for myself to get at least as far as I got the first time I tried to read it, and maybe push a little bit further to try and see what I was missing. And I think that turned out to be the case. Like at the beginning, these books are so long, they're like at least 600 to like 800 or 900 pages. And they're very expansive. They cross time, they cross different cultures and different groups of people. And so I think reading just 100 pages didn't allow me to see the expansiveness of the world. It didn't allow me time to get to know the characters and their motivations. And I think I did end up starting to really enjoy certain characters and their journeys. And actually, now that I'm on the second book, it's very interesting to see how what we thought were their morals and their strictures might be challenged, and they might stick to them even though it means doing the same thing that they've done in the past. They have suddenly decided that no, that isn't according to their thoughts and beliefs. So anyway, after reading The Grace of Kings and liking it and deciding that I would continue on with the series, I don't usually power through series all at once. I usually take breaks and switch out the kind of stuff that I'm reading. But I have a friend that I read with pretty regularly, and we decided to butter read the Paper Menagerie. And this one I was not sure about because at the time I was starting to just get back into short story collections. In the past, they didn't really work for me because, either they weren't very cohesive, or the stories weren't short enough for me to read quickly in one sitting, or they were just kind of dry and I didn't get to know characters. But I actually ended up relatively enjoying this collection. There's a lot of um, there were a few stories that really tugged at my emotions, that made me tear up. There were a lot that were more science heavy in terms of like creative ideas, you know, whether it was in space or underground or a blending of different cultures and magic. And the thing with Ken Liu is that he's very inventive, he's very creative. If you're like an engineer or like knowing about how things work, then you might really get a kick out of his work because um, inventions that are familiar to us in our modern day of life are sometimes built into these stories and these worlds and expressed in a way as if they didn't exist before, and explaining it to these characters in the way that fits into their world. So it's really cool to see things laid out that way, and some things that we take for granted we might not even actually know really how they work. So it's cool to see them laid out in the story. And there are even some things that I don't think actually exist or might not be based off of anything that we currently know, but that, you know, Ken Liu has invented and placed into the story. And seeing how they work and how they impact the plot is really interesting to me. I think that that's something that I enjoy, but that sometimes I think it works better in the larger story than it does in this short story collection. And the reason why is that if time is taken to explain how these things work, sometimes it feels like too much of an aside for such a short story. Whereas within a larger piece of work, yeah, it can sometimes take away from the flow of what's already going on, but it's just another piece of the world building for me. So I think I prefer that part of that writing in the larger series in the Dandelion Dynasty. Another thing with Ken Liu's writing is that occasionally it can feel a bit like a lecture, if you will, like the characters going on a soliloquy about their beliefs, whether it's a school of thought or a religion. And so sometimes it can feel a little preachy and maybe more telling than showing. And I do see that. And again, I find that it works better for me in the longer series because you can see how the things are layered together and there's still space for action, there's still space for intrigue and things of that nature. But I don't know, I still enjoyed the short story collection, and I would read, I think he has another one, I don't remember the exact name, but I would read that and I would see what other works outside of the Dandelion Dynasty Ken Liu has to offer. And so again, like I said, this was a success story for me. I like Ken Liu's work and I would continue to explore it. Right now I'm reading the second book in the Dandelion Dynasty, which is The Wall of Storms. I'm about 85% in, and I'm enjoying it. And it's kind of like the comfort series that I'm slowly reading through. I already have books 3 and 4, and so hopefully I will start the third books maybe by the end of the year or in 2025, and we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it ends. All right, so the next author that I'd like to give a second chance to is Katherine Addison. And here is another book that I buddy read with my friend. It's called The Goblin Emperor. And this is one of the books that was on my general radar about fantasy staples that I could probably get to with, you know, on my TBR. And I think I had the wrong impression of what the book was. I had the impression that it was irreverent, like funny, fish out of water, like a young boy figures out that he's royal and so he has to go to court and figure out how things go, and he just kind of comically stumbles his way through. And it actually ended up being a little bit more dark and quiet, and I don't know if I would say slow, and there was a bit of a murder mystery in there as well. So I will say that I didn't really like the pace of the murder mystery. I would like forget that it was going on, or like we wouldn't hear an update for a long time, and it should have been very important because it was somebody close to Maya, who is the main character, but it, or somebody related to Maya, who's the main character, but it didn't feel like it was that prominent within the story sometimes. So the things that I did like about the Goblin Emperor, I am a sucker for things like, descriptions of dress and food and jewelry and the way that the government is set up and who's who. I do like all of that stuff, and I like when characters kind of have mentors or people who are willing to explain, oh, this person is really invested and interested in this, so when you're working with them, these are the things that they might care about if you want to get them on your side. I do appreciate understanding how people fit into the larger scheme of things, so I thought that was good. The first thing that fell short for me was that I, at the beginning, was led to believe that the characters and their interpersonal relationships would build and become stronger, and there might be like bigger friendships or a bigger love story than there actually was. And that just kind of disappointed me in general. I just hoped there would be something more that I could hold on to. Whereas the thing that really bothered me was it was kind of like a bit of prejudice and racism, for lack of a better word. So Maya is a half goblin and half elf individual, and the royal people and the main citizens of this land that he suddenly finds himself the emperor of is mostly elves. And so goblins are kind of prejudiced against. And the setup is that goblins have, dark skins, are wrinkly and short, and, all these other features. For me, and I think this definitely relates to who I am as a Black woman, I'm unambiguous. I just felt like it was very hard to read Maya's internalized thoughts and self-hate, where sorry, I lost my train of thought. Where he would remark on his dark skin and his ugly features, and it was very hurtful. One, I felt bad for him because as a character he seemed like someone who wanted good, was just trying to do his best and stuff like that. So on the one hand, it was just like wishing that he had a little bit more self-confidence and wishing people around him built him up a little bit more. That was sad. But also, because of my experience, I couldn't remove it from how close to real world biases, colorism, and racism it was. And it seemed weird that this wasn't apparent to the author. And for me, if it was apparent to the author, either one, the similarities or the things that were prejudiced against in the society, I would hope that they would be a little bit different from real life. So for example, maybe the skin would be green instead of dark, and maybe the barbaric features, if you will, were something that were not historically stereotypically attributed to like Black and brown people in this real life, because that was definitely like jarring and uncomfortable, and I feel like unnecessary, especially because the text didn't seem to really challenge it. There was one character maybe who kind of like fizzled off and commented a thing here or there where it seemed like, oh, they shouldn't judge you that way, but it was never anything where I felt like it helped Maya grow in what he believed. And so it just kind of left a weird taste in my mouth. But yeah, otherwise, like, I like the writing, and I think that the naming conventions and the world and the way the ruling pieces were set up, I think that was definitely unique, and that made it challenging, and that made it interesting because it wasn't something that is found in like every single fantasy that you read. But those two things were like the biggest disappointments for me. I did make a post about it on Instagram, and somebody that I speak to relatively often about different reads that we enjoy or art recommended another series under the author's other name. So she also writes under Sarah Monette, and actually I don't know which name is her real name, but that person recommended Mélusine to me. I'm actually not sure if that's how you pronounce it. And I remember reading the synopsis. I asked my friend that I read with if it's something that she would be interested in trying, and she said it might be a little bit too dark for her. So it's something that I'll read on my own once I pick it up. And right now, I don't remember the synopsis. I read it a while ago, and it was interesting enough that I decided to order it and give it a chance. It does sound like it'll be something that's pretty dark, and what I'm hoping to see is that if there are taboo topics in this dark world, that the author addresses it with more nuance, and maybe challenges, stereotypical beliefs a little bit more. I don't know. Something about it made me think that it might be a little bit more of a steampunk world, but I might be wrong about that. But anyway, hopefully there's just a little bit more substance, a little bit more to say, and we'll see how it goes. And then the last author, I don't have the first book that I read by them. It's another one that I gave away, but it's Michelle West, and she also writes under Michelle Segarra. And I think I found that series. So The Hidden City, which is the book I read, is the first book in the House War series. And I think I found it when I was searching for like underrated fantasy or something like that. And again, I'm the type of reader that enjoys having like a longer, slower fantasy or sci-fi series to slowly work through while I'm like also reading other variety of things. So I picked it up because a lot of people were like talking about it and saying it was good on the thread. And I actually think that the other series by Michelle West / Michelle Segarra that I was interested in, called The Sun Sword, I think when I was doing my research, they recommended actually reading the first 3 books in this series, the House War series, before going into the Sun Sword series. So I think that's why I ended up starting with that series first. And there were things that I liked, but it was more aesthetic based. So there's like a ragtag group of orphans who, have to look out for each other. They help each other out, like throwing things together for their dinner, or looking out for each other at the market while one, group goes get them new boots and new shoes for the winter. They have a kind of mentor who seems to know a lot about the way the world works and keeping them safe and using disguises to get by, but it seems like maybe he is not super strong and might not be able to protect them forever. So it's important for them to kind of grow up and be able to take care of themselves. There's like a ruined city underneath their existing one that, is very mysterious. Like the history seems so ancient that not everybody remembers. Like no one really remembers how things used to be. How did it end up there? So sometimes they would explore. Sometimes they would use it as like a shortcut to avoid city guards when they're going on one of their missions. And it's, that hidden city may be haunted. Something's going on in there that they need to figure out. So all that stuff is like very interesting to me, very cool. And the thing that I think was harder for me is that I think I remember the book being like very long-winded, and so it just felt tedious to get through. There would be some really cool sections that stood out and that were interesting, but then you would just kind of plod through more. So I think it took me a while to get through it. Another thing is that I remember there being a style in the writing, like a sentence that was formed a particular way, and that style of sentence was repeated often. And I think it was something like, if so and so, then so and so. And it, I don't know, I think I remember it bothering me, and I don't know if it would still bother me now. Um, as an example, I've been reading through The First Law. I just finished the second book, Before They Are Hanged, and I noticed that Joe Abercrombie uses some motifs. So there are things like, say one thing about character name, say he's, and then insert the description. And then also there's a phrase, you have to be realistic about things, that's repeated pretty often throughout the series so far. And I've found that that actually creates like a cohesiveness, a style, a tone, and such with the book. And I find that once I noticed it, it didn't really bother me that much. And so now that I've seen it in other works, I wonder if it would bother me as much. So anyway, I think The Hidden City, of all the three different authors I've talked about, that's probably the one that I read first, or like furthest back, and so I remember it the least. So getting into the second book will be probably pretty difficult, and maybe I can like go look for a summary of the first book to help me out. But anyway, if I do like this one, I will probably read the third book in the House War series, and then move into that original series that I was interested. So there are 6 books in that Sun Sword series, and they're pretty chunky. And then I think after that, I'm supposed to go and finish the rest of the House War series. There are actually 8 books in the House War series, and the 7th and 8th book, I think, were published not too long ago, like maybe in 2019. So I kind of have the feeling of wanting to be like current, wanting to be in the know. So that's one of the reasons why I want to give this series another chance. I've also been thinking about the fact that I just finished The Realm of the Elderlings not too long ago. And when I read the first trilogy, the Farseer trilogy, I listened to it on audio. I don't think I knew everything that was going on all the time. I don't think I was swept away with it all the time. And it wasn't even until I got to Live Ship Traders that I was like, oh yeah, I really like this. I really want to know what's going to happen next. And I really started loving the series. So I think that it's fair that some series, especially very long ones that have all sorts of different worlds and starting points, might take a little while to find its footing. And the fact that it was ended recently, I think, makes it possible that the author could have, found some things in their writing style that they've adjusted or improved on or changed, or, they might have had a different idea when they first started the series, and then it's changed behind the scenes and the reader doesn't even know. And another thing about currency, or being current, I don't know how to say that properly, is that I just found out that there's going to be another sub-series within this world. I think the first one came out last year in 2023, and I think the next few books in that series have already been sold or something like that. And so the idea that things are continuing makes me curious about, whether I would like the continuation. And so again, that makes me want to keep trying, give this another shot, and see if it's something that I need to keep on my radar and be invested in, and look out for releases and try to see if there's like a community that's talking about theories and ideas and stuff like that. So you never know. I don't know exactly when I'm going to get to the second 2 authors. I'm in the middle of a few books right now, and I have a lot of books on hold at the library that might come in at any point in time. But hopefully I like them enough that either I get, I start reading them and I have an update, or I finish them and I don't DNF them. And hopefully then I can just do a follow-up or post about it. and let you all know. We'll see about that though. I would love to know if you've read any of these books or authors, and what are your thoughts about them? Are you interested in reading any of these? Or do you have any authors of your own that you're interested in trying once again? Just leave a comment and I would love to hear your thoughts. Anyway, thank you for watching. Bye.